I sat by that same hotel pool in Koh Samui where I first met Colin Matthews 3 years ago, watching the sunset over the Gulf of Thailand when the call came through. The voice on the other end was shaking, broken, desperate in a way I had never heard from my old friend before. "They took her," he whispered, and I could hear him crying. "They took Supaporn, and they want $50,000 or they'll kill her." What I thought was a rescue mission would turn into the most twisted psychological nightmare either of us could have imagined. And by the time the truth finally surfaced, Colin's entire world would be shattered beyond repair. Before we go any further into this dark journey, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this story to its shocking conclusion. And there are many more true crime stories like this one coming your way. Colin Matthews was the kind of man who wore his 58 years like a well-tailored suit, perfectly fitted but showing subtle signs of wear around the edges. When I met him at the Centara Grand Beach Resort that humid evening in March, he was sitting alone at the pool bar, nursing his third whiskey and staring out at the darkening ocean with eyes that held too much sadness for a man on vacation in paradise. He had that particular look that recently divorced men get, that mixture of relief and profound loneliness that makes them either completely reckless or utterly cautious. Colin, I would later learn, was definitely the reckless type. He was a successful architect from Manchester, the kind who designed shopping centers and office complexes, making good money but never quite achieving the creative fulfillment he had dreamed of in university. His marriage to Sarah had lasted 26 years, producing 2 children who were now adults with families of their own, barely calling except on holidays. The divorce had been amicable enough. She got the house in Cheshire. He got his freedom and a substantial settlement that left him with more money than he knew what to do with, and absolutely no idea how to spend his remaining years. First time in Thailand, he told me that night. His Manchester accent thick with alcohol and exhaustion. Sarah always wanted to go to Spain or Italy, somewhere safe and predictable. Now here I am, 58 years old, sitting in a country where I don't speak the language, don't understand the culture, and honestly, don't know why I chose this place. He laughed bitterly, maybe because it's as far from Manchester as I could get without leaving the planet. I understood that feeling. We talked for hours that night. 2 middle-aged men trying to figure out what comes after the life you thought you were supposed to live falls apart. Colin was staying for 3 weeks, he told me. Maybe longer if he liked it. He had no schedule, no plans, no one expecting him back home. For the first time in decades, he was completely free. And that freedom terrified him more than any responsibility ever had. The next morning, I found him at the same spot by the pool. But everything about his demeanor had changed. Gone was the melancholy drunk from the night before, replaced by a man who looked like he had discovered electricity. He was practically glowing, checking his phone every few seconds with the kind of smile I hadn't seen on his face during our entire previous conversation. "I met someone," he said before I even sat down, unable to contain his excitement. "Last night after you left. Her name is Supaporn, and she's absolutely incredible." I have to admit, my first instinct was concern. Colin was vulnerable, emotionally raw, and carrying around enough money to make him an attractive target for anyone looking to take advantage of a lonely tourist. But when I saw how happy he looked, how alive he seemed for the first time since I had met him, I kept my concerns to myself. Supaporn was 29 years old, originally from Udon Thani in northeastern Thailand. But she had been living on Koh Samui for the past 5 years, working at various resorts and hotels. Colin described her as beautiful, which I'm sure she was. But more importantly to him, she was interested in everything he had to say. She asked about his work, his life back in England, his dreams and disappointments, and she listened with the kind of focused attention that his ex-wife had stopped giving him somewhere around year 10 of their marriage. "She's not like the other girls here," Colin insisted, though I wondered how he would know, having been in Thailand for less than 48 hours. "She's educated, speaks perfect English, and she's studying business at the local university. She wants to open her own travel agency someday. Help tourists have authentic Thai experiences, not just the commercial stuff." They had met at a beachside bar where she was having dinner with friends. Colin had been sitting alone, as was becoming his habit, when a sudden tropical downpour sent everyone running for cover under the same small pavilion. Supaporn had struck up a conversation, asking if he was enjoying his stay, where he was from. The usual tourist small talk. But Colin said something about the way she looked at him. Really looked at him. Made him feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced in years. She was petite, maybe 5 feet 2 inches, with long black hair that she usually wore in a simple ponytail, and a smile that seemed to light up her entire face. Colin showed me photos on his phone, dozens of them already, and I had to admit, she was striking. But more than her physical beauty, there was something in her eyes in these pictures, a warmth and intelligence that I could see had captivated my friend completely. "We talked for 3 hours that first night," Colin continued, his enthusiasm infectious despite my growing unease. "About everything. She told me about growing up poor in Udon Thani, how her parents worked in rice fields their entire lives, how she was the first person in her family to go to university. She's supporting her whole family, sending money home every month, working 2 jobs while she studies, and she still finds time to volunteer at the local animal shelter." The story was perfect, I realized later. Too perfect, but at the time, watching Colin's face light up as he talked about this woman, I wanted to believe it was real. He deserved happiness, deserved to feel valued and appreciated. If this young Thai woman could give him that, even temporarily, maybe it wasn't such a bad thing. Over the next few days, Colin's entire vacation routine changed. Instead of solitary drinking sessions by the pool, he was out exploring the island with Supaporn. They visited temples and waterfalls, took cooking classes, went snorkeling in the crystal clear waters around the island. Colin, who had been terrified of trying new foods just days earlier, was now posting Instagram photos of himself eating insects and spicy somtam salad, grinning like a teenager. Take a moment here and pause this video. Write in the comments what seems suspicious to you about this story so far. What red flags are you noticing that Colin is completely missing? I'm curious to see if you're picking up on the same details that started bothering me during those first few days. The transformation in Colin was remarkable, but also concerning. This was a man who had spent his entire adult life following schedules, meeting deadlines, being responsible for others. Now he was acting like he was 25 years old again, staying out until dawn, spending money without thinking about it, making impulsive decisions based entirely on emotion rather than logic. Supaporn seemed to encourage this new version of Colin. She would suggest expensive restaurants and activities, always offering to pay her share, but somehow never quite managing to when the bill arrived. "Oh, I forgot my wallet," or "My card isn't working," or "Let me get it next time. You got it this time." Colin didn't seem to mind. He was happy to pay, happy to be the provider, happy to feel needed and wanted. Within a week, Colin had extended his stay indefinitely. He called his travel agent back in Manchester and cancelled his return flight. He started looking into long-term visa options, talking about renting an apartment, maybe even buying property on the island. "Why should I go back?" he asked me one evening as we watched Supaporn dance with her friends at a beach bar. "What's waiting for me in Manchester? An empty flat and a job designing buildings I'll never be proud of. Here, I feel alive again." I tried to voice my concerns gently, the speed of everything, the way she always needed him to pay for things, the fact that he knew virtually nothing about her beyond the story she had told him. But Colin was in love, real love for the first time in decades, and nothing I said could penetrate that intoxication. "She's not using me," he insisted whenever I brought up the subject. "She could be with anyone she wants. There are plenty of younger, more attractive tourists here. She chooses to be with me because we have a connection, a real connection." And maybe they did. When I watched them together, I saw genuine affection in her eyes, real laughter at his jokes, sincere interest in his stories about life back home. She remembered details about his children, asked follow-up questions about his work, seemed to genuinely enjoy his company. If she was acting, she was the most talented actress I had ever encountered. But there were moments, brief flashes, when she thought no one was looking, where I caught something else in her expression, a calculation, a measuring look, as if she were constantly evaluating the situation and adjusting her performance accordingly. Once, I saw her texting frantically while Colin was in the bathroom, her fingers flying across the screen with an urgency that seemed inconsistent with casual conversation. When he returned, the phone disappeared instantly, and she was back to her warm, attentive self. The first serious red flag came during Colin's third week on the island. Supaporn needed money for her university tuition, a significant sum that she claimed she had to pay immediately or risk losing her place in the program. The amount was $15,000, more than many Thai families see in a year. But Colin didn't hesitate. "It's an investment in our future," he told me. And I realized with a sinking heart that he was already thinking in terms of their shared future, their combined destiny. She's going to finish her degree, start her travel business, and I'll help her grow it. We're a team now. I wanted to shake him, to force him to see what seemed so obvious to me. But Colin was happier than I had ever seen him. And who was I to destroy that happiness based on suspicions and cynical assumptions? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was just what love looked like when it hit a lonely, vulnerable man like a tropical storm. The money was transferred within 24 hours, and Supaporn was overwhelmed with gratitude. She cried real tears, thanked Colin repeatedly, promised she would pay him back as soon as she graduated and started earning proper money. She even showed him what looked like official university documents, tuition payment receipts, confirmation of her enrollment status. Everything looked legitimate, professional, convincing. But Colin's generosity didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, there were other expenses, other emergencies. Supaporn's mother fell ill and needed expensive medical treatment. Her brother was in trouble with loan sharks and needed money to pay them off. The landlord of her apartment was demanding 3 months' rent in advance. Each story came with documentation, with tears, with desperate gratitude when Colin inevitably offered to help. By the time Colin had been on Koh Samui for 2 months, he had transferred over $60,000 to various accounts connected to Supaporn and her family. He was still wealthy enough that this wasn't devastating financially. But the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Every week brought a new crisis, a new urgent need for money, and Colin responded every time like a man under a spell. "She's had such a hard life," he explained when I finally confronted him directly about the mounting expenses. "Her family depends on her, and she's trying so hard to build something better for herself. How can I not help when I have the means to make such a difference in her life?" The manipulation was masterful, I had to admit. Supaporn never asked for money directly. Instead, she would confide in Colin about her problems, share her fears and stress, and then express amazement and overwhelming gratitude when he offered to help. She made him feel like a hero, like a savior, like the answer to prayers she had been praying her entire life. Their relationship became increasingly intense and exclusive. Supaporn gradually stopped spending time with her friends, claiming they were jealous of her relationship with Colin. She became more possessive, more needy, calling him constantly when they were apart, showing up unexpectedly at the hotel to surprise him. Colin interpreted this as evidence of her deep love for him, but I was starting to see it as something much more controlling and calculated. The sexual relationship between them was clearly central to the dynamic, though Colin was too much of a gentleman to discuss it in detail. But I could see the effect it was having on him. He looked exhausted some mornings, satisfied in a way that made him glow, but also somehow drained, as if he were giving more of himself than he could afford to lose. Supaporn had moved into his hotel room within a month of their meeting, though she maintained her own apartment for appearances. She was with him constantly now, managing his schedule, answering his phone, handling his correspondence. She had become indispensable to his daily life in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. "She takes such good care of me," Colin would say. And it was true. His clothes were always clean and pressed. His meals were ordered and waiting for him. His medications were organized and delivered on schedule. Supaporn anticipated his needs before he even recognized them himself. But this level of caretaking also meant complete control over his environment and access to all aspects of his life. One evening in late May, nearly 3 months into their relationship, Colin came to my room looking shaken and confused. Supaporn had received a phone call during dinner that had left her terrified and crying. Men were looking for her. Dangerous men who claimed she owed them money. She was afraid to go back to her apartment, afraid to be alone, afraid they might hurt Colin if they found out about their relationship. "Who are these men?" I asked. though I already suspected I knew the type. Loan sharks, maybe gangsters, Colin said, his voice trembling with fear and anger. They're demanding $50,000, claiming she borrowed money from them months ago. She swears she never borrowed anything from them, that it must be some kind of mistake or scam. But they have photos of her. They know where she lives. They know about us. The setup was perfect, I realized with growing horror. Create a crisis that threatened not just Supaporn, but Colin himself. Make him feel responsible for her safety. Make him believe that his money was the only thing standing between her and serious harm. Appeal to his protective instincts and his genuine care for her well-being. She's begging me not to pay them, Colin continued. Says she'd rather disappear than put me at risk. But I can't let anything happen to her. These aren't the kind of people who just forget about debts. If I don't pay them, they'll hurt her. Or worse. I spent the next hour trying to talk sense into Colin, pointing out the convenient timing of this crisis, the suspicious amount of money being demanded, the way Supaporn's financial emergencies kept escalating. But Colin was beyond reason now, completely convinced that the woman he loved was in mortal danger and that he was her only hope for survival. The payment was arranged for the following evening. Colin would meet Supaporn's contact at a remote location on the north side of the island and hand over $50,000 in cash. Money he had withdrawn from multiple ATMs across Koh Samui over the previous 24 hours. In return, Supaporn would be safe, the debt would be cleared, and they could continue their relationship without fear. I begged Colin to let me come with him, or at least to inform the local police about what was happening, but he refused, claiming that any involvement of authorities or witnesses would put Supaporn at greater risk. He had been instructed to come alone, bring the money in a specific type of bag, and follow exact instructions about where to wait and how to behave. The night of the exchange, I sat in my hotel room filled with dread, checking my phone constantly for any word from Colin. Hours passed with no communication, and I began to imagine the worst possible scenarios. Maybe this wasn't just a scam. Maybe Colin had stumbled into something genuinely dangerous. And now, both he and Supaporn were in real trouble. At 3 a.m, Colin finally called. His voice was strange, hollow, completely different from the panicked man I had spoken with earlier. "It's done," he said simply. "The money is paid. Supaporn is safe. Where are you? Are you okay? Is she with you?" "I'm back at the hotel. Supaporn went to stay with friends tonight. Make sure everything is really settled before we're seen together again. We'll meet tomorrow afternoon." Something in his tone made my blood run cold, but I couldn't identify what exactly was wrong. Colin sounded like he was in shock, like he had witnessed something traumatic that he couldn't quite process yet. The next morning, Colin didn't answer his phone. I went to his room and found the door unlocked. Colin sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at his laptop screen with an expression I had never seen before. It was the look of a man whose entire understanding of reality had just been shattered. "Colin, what happened? Are you all right?" He turned to look at me, and I saw tears streaming down his face, though his expression remained eerily calm. "She's not real," he said quietly. "None of it was real." If you're enjoying this psychological thriller so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me if you've ever known someone who fell victim to a romance scam like this. The story is about to take a turn that even I didn't see coming. Colin had spent the sleepless hours after the money exchange doing something he should have done months earlier: investigating Supaporn online, using reverse image searches, social media deep dives, and publicly available records. He had uncovered a web of deception so elaborate and sophisticated that it took my breath away. The photos Supaporn had been using were stolen from a Thai Instagram influencer who lived in Bangkok and had never been to Koh Samui. The university documents were convincing forgeries. The apartment she claimed to rent didn't exist at the address she had given him. Even her phone number was registered to a different name entirely. "Look at this," Colin said, turning the laptop screen toward me. On it were dozens of photos of Supaporn with different men, all of them middle-aged, all of them clearly foreign tourists. Screenshots of dating profiles using the same photos but with different names and ages. Forum posts from other travelers warning about a romance scammer operating on Koh Samui who matched her exact description and methods. But the most devastating discovery was a video Colin had found on a Thai social media platform. It showed the real Supaporn, the woman he had been living with for 3 months, laughing with a group of friends as she showed off expensive jewelry and designer handbags, bragging in Thai about the stupid Farang who was paying for her lifestyle. The video had been posted just 2 weeks earlier, around the time Colin had given her money for her mother's medical bills. "I had my friend back home translate the conversation," Colin said, his voice completely flat. "She calls me walking a TM and desperate old fool. She says I'm so lonely and pathetic that I'll believe anything as long as she keeps sleeping with me. Her friends are all laughing, asking when she's going to finish the job and move on to the next target." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. This wasn't just a simple romance scam where someone pretended to love you to get your money. This was psychological torture, an elaborate performance designed to make Colin fall so deeply in love that he would willingly destroy his financial security and emotional well-being. Supaporn hadn't just stolen his money. She had violated his deepest vulnerabilities and mocked his genuine need for connection. "The kidnapping was fake," Colin continued. "There were no gangsters, no debt, no danger. She probably organized the whole thing herself, maybe with the help of those friends in the video. I gave $50,000 to people who were laughing at me the entire time." I felt physically sick listening to this recitation of betrayal and manipulation. Colin had trusted completely, loved genuinely, and given generously, only to discover that everything he had experienced was an elaborate lie designed to exploit his loneliness and desperation. "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "I'm going to find her," Colin said, and for the first time since I had known him, his voice carried a note of genuine menace. "I'm going to confront her, get my money back, and make sure she can't do this to anyone else." The next 72 hours were a descent into a darkness I hadn't known my friend was capable of. Colin became obsessed with tracking down the real Supaporn, using every resource at his disposal to locate her true identity and whereabouts. He hired a local private investigator, bribed hotel staff for information, and spent hours walking through markets and bars, showing her photo and asking questions. The investigation revealed that Supaporn's real name was Ploy Ratanakon, and she was indeed from Udon Thani. though she had been living on Koh Samui for 8 years, not 5. She wasn't a university student, but a professional romance scammer who had been running variations of the same con on foreign tourists for at least 6 years. The private investigator estimated she had stolen over $500,000 from various victims during that time. Colin's case wasn't even her current project. While she had been playing the loving girlfriend with him, she had been simultaneously running similar scams on at least 2 other men, a German businessman and an Australian retiree. The private investigator showed Colin photos of Ploy with these other men, exhibiting the same affectionate behavior, the same tears and gratitude, the same elaborate performance that had convinced him she loved him. "She's a professional," the investigator explained in broken English. "Very smart, very good at reading people, knowing what they want to hear. She studies you for weeks before making her move, learns your weaknesses, your fears, your dreams. Then she becomes exactly what you need her to be." The final piece of the puzzle was discovering where Ploy actually lived. A luxury condominium in the hills above Chaweng. Purchased with money stolen from previous victims, she drove a new BMW, owned designer clothes worth more than most Thai people earn in a year, and supported not just her own extravagant lifestyle, but also her boyfriend, a Thai man her own age who was fully aware of her criminal activities and helped her plan and execute them. When Colin finally confronted Ploy at her condominium, I was with him, terrified of what he might do in his state of rage and betrayal. We waited outside the building until she returned from a shopping trip, arms full of expensive packages, laughing on her phone as she spoke in rapid Thai. The moment she saw Colin, her entire demeanor changed. Gone was the sweet, vulnerable woman who had captivated him for months. In her place stood a calculating predator who had been caught and was now evaluating her options for escape or damage control. "Colin, darling," she said, her voice still carrying that same musical quality that had enchanted him months earlier. "What are you doing here? I thought you were going back to England this week." "Cut the act, Ploy," Colin replied, using her real name deliberately. "I know who you are. I know what you've been doing. And I know about the others." For just a moment, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear, as she realized that her carefully constructed deception had been completely exposed. But then something else took over. A hardness that transformed her features into something almost unrecognizable. "So what?" she said, her English suddenly crisp and unaccented, revealing an education level far beyond what she had claimed. "You gave me money willingly. You got what you paid for. Good sex, girlfriend experience, someone to make you feel important. Where's the crime in that?" The casual cruelty of her response hit Colin like a physical blow. This woman had shared his bed, listened to his dreams, comforted him through his loneliness, all while viewing him as nothing more than a source of income to be drained and discarded. "You made me fall in love with you," Colin said, his voice breaking. "You made me believe you cared about me, that we had a future together. You took advantage of my loneliness, my need to feel wanted and valued. That's not just theft, it's emotional torture." Ploy laughed, a sound completely different from the warm musical laughter Colin had fallen in love with. "You made yourself fall in love with me," she replied. "I never promised you anything except today. You created a fantasy in your head about who I was and what we could be together. That's not my responsibility." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Colin demanding his money back and Ploy refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing or obligation to compensate her victims. She claimed everything had been gifts freely given, that she had never explicitly promised love or a future together, that Colin's expectations were his own creation rather than her manipulation. But as we prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Ploy's boyfriend arrived home, and the dynamics shifted dramatically. He was a large man, muscular and intimidating, with traditional Thai tattoos covering his arms and neck. When he saw Colin and me at his girlfriend's door, his response was immediate and threatening. The confrontation escalated quickly. Ploy's boyfriend, whose name was Somchai, began yelling at us in Thai, clearly telling us to leave or face violence. But Colin, driven by months of accumulated rage and betrayal, refused to back down. He started yelling back in English, demanding his money, calling Ploy a thief and a liar, threatening to go to the police with evidence of her crimes. What happened next changed everything. Somchai pulled out a knife, a serious weapon that transformed the situation from angry confrontation to life-threatening emergency. But instead of threatening us with it, he turned toward Ploy, screaming at her in rapid Thai, clearly furious about something she had done or failed to do. Colin's Thai language skills were limited, but I had picked up enough during my own travels to understand the gist of their argument. Somchai was angry that Ploy had been caught, that her scam had been exposed, that she had brought dangerous attention to their operation. But more than that, he was furious that she had been carrying on emotional and physical relationships with her victims when she was supposed to be maintaining professional distance. The knife fight that followed was brief but vicious. Ploy screamed as Somchai accused her of actually developing feelings for some of her targets, of betraying not just her victims, but him as well. In his jealousy and rage, he had become as much of a threat to her as he was to us. Colin, despite everything Ploy had done to him, stepped between them. This woman had destroyed his life, stolen his money, and mocked his vulnerabilities. But he couldn't watch her be stabbed by her abusive boyfriend. His intervention probably saved her life, but it also resulted in him being slashed across the forearm as he wrestled the knife away from Somchai. The police arrived within minutes, called by neighbors who had heard the screaming and fighting. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Ploy's operation. Dozens of victims, hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen, a sophisticated network of accomplices and money laundering systems that had been operating for years. But the most shocking discovery was that Ploy hadn't been lying about everything. Her family really was poor. She really had been supporting them, and she really had been trying to escape the poverty and limited opportunities of rural Thailand. Her methods were criminal and cruel, but her motivations were more complex than simple greed or malice. During the police investigation, Ploy broke down completely, confessing not just to the financial crimes, but to the emotional impact her actions had had on her victims. She admitted that she had developed genuine feelings for some of them, including Colin, which had made her crimes more psychologically damaging for everyone involved. "I started this because I was desperate," she told the police through an interpreter. "My family was starving. I had no education, no legitimate opportunities to make enough money to help them. The first time was supposed to be just once, just enough to pay for my mother's surgery. But it was so easy, and the money was so much more than I could ever earn honestly that I kept doing it. The case took months to resolve through the Thai legal system, during which time Colin remained on Koh Samui, partly as a witness, but mostly because he couldn't bring himself to leave. He was struggling with a complex mix of emotions: anger at being deceived, hurt at having his trust violated, but also a stubborn remnant of the love he had felt for the woman he thought Ploy was. During this period, something remarkable happened. Colin met Supaporn, a Thai woman who worked as a translator for the police department. She was 42 years old, divorced, with 2 teenage children, and possessed of a straightforward honesty that was the complete opposite of Ploy's manipulative charm. Supaporn had seen dozens of romance scam cases over the years and knew immediately what Colin was going through. She didn't try to seduce him or take advantage of his vulnerability. Instead, she offered practical help, emotional support, and the kind of genuine friendship that Colin desperately needed during the darkest period of his life. "She never asks me for money," Colin told me 6 months later, as we sat by that same hotel pool where we had first met. "She pays for her own meals, insists on splitting expenses, even tries to pay for mine sometimes. She's proud, independent, has her own career and her own life. When we're together, it's because we enjoy each other's company, not because either of us needs something from the other." The contrast between his relationships with Ploy and Supaporn couldn't have been more stark. Where Ploy had been needy and dependent, creating crisis after crisis that required Colin's intervention, Supaporn was self-sufficient and capable. Where Ploy had isolated Colin from his friends and former life, Supaporn encouraged him to maintain his connections and pursue his own interests. But perhaps most importantly, Supaporn had been completely honest with Colin from the beginning about who she was, what she wanted, and what she could offer in a relationship. There were no grand declarations of love, no promises of forever, no manufactured emergencies or desperate situations. Just 2 adults getting to know each other honestly and deciding whether they wanted to build something together. The legal case against Ploy concluded with a sentence of 8 years in Thai prison and an order to pay restitution to her victims. Though everyone involved knew that recovering the stolen money would be nearly impossible. Most of it had been spent on luxury items or sent to various accounts that had since been closed or emptied. Colin recovered about 20% of his losses, enough to sting, but not enough to be financially devastating. More importantly, he had learned lessons about himself, about love, about the difference between being needed and being wanted, that would serve him for the rest of his life. The day before Colin finally returned to England, nearly a year after his originally planned 3-week vacation, we sat together watching the sunset from the same spot where he had first told me about meeting Supaporn. "Do you regret it?" I asked him. "Coming here, meeting her, going through all of this?" Colin was quiet for a long time, considering the question seriously. "I regret being so naive," he said finally. "I regret not listening to you when you tried to warn me. I regret losing all that money and the embarrassment of being such an easy target. But do I regret the whole experience? Number, because it led me to understand things about myself that I never would have learned otherwise." He explained that his relationship with Ploy, toxic and manipulative as it was, had shown him that he was capable of feeling passionate love again after his divorce. Her betrayal had been devastating, but it had also forced him to examine his own patterns of neediness and codependency that had contributed to the failure of his marriage. "I was trying to buy love," he admitted, "not just with Ploy, but with Sarah too, in different ways. I thought if I provided enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, then people would have to love me back. What I learned is that real love can't be purchased or earned. It's freely given, or it's not really love at all." His relationship with Supaporn had taught him what genuine partnership looked like. Two independent people choosing to share their lives not because they needed each other to survive, but because they wanted to experience life together. The difference was subtle but profound. "Supaporn doesn't love me because I'm her ticket to financial security or a better life," Colin said. "She has her own money, her own career, her own goals. She loves me, or at least cares about me, because of who I am as a person, not what I can provide for her. That's something I've never experienced before, and it's worth everything I went through to find it." 3 years later, Colin is still with Supaporn, though they maintain residences in both Thailand and England, splitting their time between the two countries. He has started a small architectural practice in Koh Samui, designing sustainable resorts and eco-friendly developments, work that gives him the creative fulfillment his career back home never provided. As for Ploy, she was released from prison after serving 5 years of her sentence, and according to local reports, she immediately left Thailand for Cambodia, presumably to start over in a new location with fresh potential victims. The cycle continues, as it does for most professional romance scammers, until age or circumstance finally forces them to find legitimate ways to survive. But Colin's story isn't really about Ploy, or even about romance scams in general. It's about the universal human need for connection, for love, for feeling valued and important to another person. It's about how that need can make us vulnerable to those who would exploit it, but also how it can lead us to discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed. The most important lesson Colin learned wasn't about avoiding scammers or protecting his money. It was about recognizing the difference between authentic love and manufactured affection, between being cherished for who you are and being valued for what you can provide. Those are lessons that apply far beyond the world of international romance scams, touching on fundamental questions about how we form relationships and what we truly need from other people. Today, Colin is genuinely happy in a way that goes far deeper than the manufactured bliss he experienced during his months with Ploy. His relationship with Supaporn is built on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection rather than neediness and exploitation. He has found work that fulfills him creatively, developed friendships with other expatriates and locals, and created a life that feels authentic and sustainable. Most importantly, he has learned to be alone without being lonely, to enjoy his own company, and pursue his own interests without desperately needing another person to validate his worth. That self-sufficiency has made him a better partner to Supaporn, and it has protected him from falling victim to future predators who might try to exploit his vulnerabilities. Looking back on that first night I met Colin by the hotel pool, I can see now that his journey was inevitable. A man that lonely, that desperate for connection, was always going to be vulnerable to someone like Ploy. But perhaps that vulnerability was also what allowed him to eventually find something real with Supaporn. You have to be willing to risk heartbreak if you want to find genuine love. The romance scam industry continues to thrive, preying on people like Colin all around the world. Lonely divorced men, widowed women, young people seeking adventure, older adults looking for companionship in their golden years. The methods evolve with technology, but the fundamental psychology remains the same. Find someone who needs love, become exactly what they're looking for, and then exploit that manufactured connection for financial gain. Colin's story is both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. It shows how completely a skilled predator can deceive even intelligent, successful people when they target the right vulnerabilities at the right time. But it also demonstrates that survival is possible, that growth can come from even the most devastating betrayals, and that real love can still be found by those brave enough to remain open to it. If you know someone who has fallen victim to a romance scam, or if you're currently in a relationship that has some of the warning signs we've discussed in this story, remember that there's no shame in being deceived by someone who has made deception their profession. The shame belongs entirely to the predators who exploit human loneliness for profit. But also remember that healing is possible, that better relationships await those willing to learn from their experiences, and that the capacity for love that makes us vulnerable to scammers is also what makes us capable of forming genuine, lasting connections with people who deserve our trust. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever encountered someone who you suspected was running a romance scam? What red flags did you notice that helped you identify the deception? Or maybe you have a story about finding real love after being betrayed or deceived. Share your experiences below, because your insights might help protect someone else from falling victim to these elaborate psychological manipulations. And don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that explore the complex psychology behind the headlines. Until next time, stay safe, stay skeptical, and remember that if something seems too good to be true, it usually is.